The survival of a spiritual being is dependent on your internal reality. The survival of your physical being is dependent on your external reality. So you can't be like, oh, I'm abundant, but I haven't eaten in 3 days, but I'm abundant. It's like, yeah, you're abundant. You haven't eaten in 3 days. Go find food and eat. We've all had those moments of despair when we know that we have seeds of dreams that are so grand within us, desires that burn our soul, and yet our physical realm is showing us that the actualization of those dreams and us achieving those desires is nowhere near our future. What do you do in those instances when you have those beautiful dreams, but your physical world is not showing you evidence of them actualizing? How do you navigate that? My name is Belse Abo Ame.
And my name is Shatani Somalagai.
And we are
the Sapiosexual Platter. Beautiful. Yes. So in last week's episode, we obviously explored the power of the mind. And we had the pleasure of His Excellency sharing with the nation and the continent at large what the tools are to actually changing your mind so that you can experience a totally different reality. So you say to me, you say to Belle, I've worked on my mind. I'm a positive person. I believe truly that my dreams can come true. However, when I look around me, let's be honest, it's poverty, it's confusion, it's clutter, it's corruption, it's pain. What is real? Is it the internal world inside of me, which I feel deeply and have such a deep conviction about? Or is it the physical world, which represents a totally opposite reality?
Yeah. And how do you navigate that? How do you navigate the balance between the two? That thing that you felt throughout your childhood that, you know what, I'm destined for greatness. I have a genius in me. And then it's like the external world is showing you FD at school. You are flanking every job that you get.
Breakup after breakup in relationships.
Yeah. And you just don't even know like what is what
anymore.
And there's that confusion.
Yeah.
And I think to just simplify it, it's like the battle of the spirit and the flesh. You know, because we are spiritual beings having a human experience, and it's like, I am the spirit and I feel what I feel of the spirit, but my flesh is my flesh and my flesh desires what it desires.
Yeah.
So then it's like, which reality is dominant, which reality is valid? And if they're both valid, how do you balance them and navigate them to achieve the success that you do desire?
Yeah. And how do they influence
one
each
another?
Other? Yeah.
Yo.
Most times people are discouraged and people stop because the distance between what is within themselves and what they see appears to be so large that there's no point in persevering towards, that desire. There's no point in pushing, because I've been at this for 3 years, Shatani. I've done the work. I've gone for therapy. I've invested in my education. Yet I'm still unemployed.
Because as you heard from the president last week, it's all about mindset. It's all about putting yourself in the right mindset. So from that conversation, it's almost like the internal world has superiority. But for some reason, it doesn't manifest that way in reality, because people are still saying, the government is doing this to me. We're not getting enough of this. So-and-so is blocking my blessings.
Yeah.
And then it's just like, when you look at the concept of the mindset change, it's saying the power starts and ends with you.
Yeah, it's in the mind.
Yes, it's in the mind.
Yeah.
Hold within your thought process and your feeling that which is your dream and your reality. And I'm like, I as Belle feel super abundant in myself. I'm like, I'm a multi-billionaire.
If not trillionaire.
If not
trillionaire.
trillionaire.
I was going to say millionaire, so I was going to say billionaire, but it's
But then I'm just like, my reality, you're patching, and it's just like, where's the money multi-billionaire?
Yeah.
What's happening? It's such a confusing experience because obviously people, when they interact with you as your external, that what they see then there. And more of, this is what I feel of myself. So do not reduce me to my external circumstances.
Yeah, don't define me by what you see.
Exactly. But then it's just like,
but I don't see it,
of it.
You know? And there's another person who has manifested in that regard. So why should I bestow on you, you know, a certain honor that you claim to have, but
haven't
actualized?
Yeah.
And I suppose let's actually even get into the definitions.
Yeah.
You know, what is the external world? What is the internal world?
Yeah.
So for me, the external world is the tangibles. It's the table that is before me.
The
glass, you know. It's just the physical reality composed of what we see with our naked eyes, as they would say. And then the internal world is made up of our feelings, imagination, our mind, you know. And more often than not, I'm sure you're having a conversation, you're listening to this podcast, but there's a lot going on undoubtedly in your internal world.
Yeah, it's a balance of subjectivity and objectivity, and bringing it down to law. It's like with law, there's always the balance of objectivity and subjectivity.
Absolutely.
And law is very objectively based.
Yes.
And in very few instances do they then accommodate the internal world to say, what was the mens rea of that person when they acted in the behavior that they acted?
The way that they did.
Yeah. So how do you then balance subjectivity and objectivity in your everyday life, and in particular in relation to this conversation, in amassing success for yourself and accelerating the consciousness of African people to a certain level? Because we can look at the consciousness of African people and say, where is it? Where is our internal world? Because we've been in this state, which is almost victim-like for such many years. Slavery, colonialism, now neo-colonialism, mental colonialism. And it's like it's going on, which means that it's a reflection after for so long.
Perhaps it's a reflection of our
internal
world.
And how distorted it is, and how it doesn't have a clarity in terms of what is the vision for the individual African, what is the individual for the collective consciousness of Africa.
For me, then, it would be what influences the other. So does the external world influence the internal world, or does the external world impact the internal world?
I think it's a balance of both. It's a balance of both, dependent on where your ability to perceive and your awareness is at. If you have not built self-awareness, if you haven't awakened to the polarity of existence, awakened to the grandness and the magnitude of existence, then you would definitely think that the external influences the internal. And I feel like that puts people in a very reactive mode, where it's like, this happened to me. I don't have money because the government is not providing me opportunities.
Yes.
I don't have money because they are stealing our money. So
I am an African predisposed to negative reality.
Thank you.
Yeah, the fact that we even call it a predisposition, but it appears to be the consensus.
So there's that element, and then there's thought and reality, as we learned from last week with the power of the mind. You are what you think, you are what you feel. And you have to hold that frequency of thinking and feeling for a certain period of time. It's confusing because sometimes you think you're holding the frequency, but your external manifestations are not showing that which you think you're holding at a frequency to externalize. And then it just brings the question of like, how long do you have to hold the frequency internally before it externalizes? When you live life objectified, or the objective feeling like the objective influences the internal reality, which is what happens when you are pre-awakening, then you live a very reactive life, a very victim life, that life happens to me, not for you. And then you go through a journey when you build your awareness of life and you expand your consciousness, then you possibly would transition to life happens for me. I make things happen. I'm co-creating. It starts and ends with me. and then you shift your thinking, you then never know when your thinking is going to bear fruit in the external.
Where it's going to have the match, where it will be that match.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So how do you navigate that?
I'm tempted to like be a teacher about this. Because in my mind, at least the way I understand it, it's like I wouldn't even draw conclusions. I would say there's a subset where definitely the outer world affects the inner world.
Yeah.
An outer occurrence takes place. Of course, it's going to impact your internal world.
Yeah.
Say you have a loss. That's an external occurrence which naturally should lead to grief. We can debate whether your walls should fall apart or not. I think that's where the conversation comes in. But like just from a teaching perspective, it would be okay, fine. Definitely, we're not saying that you move through life and things happen and you're like robotic. You know, of course, things happening externally. There's an undeniable impact that it has in the external world and also in the internal world of what could be the immediate reaction to an external occurrence.
Yeah.
And then there's the other box of there is the internal world affecting the external reality. Say we're in a room and we're just having a good time, it's you and me, and somebody that we both dislike walks into the room. And that person didn't do anything. They just we're at a restaurant having a good old time. Maybe the last time we saw them was a year ago. But the collective agreement between us, which is, I believe, an internal function, is that, you know, this person is, I don't know, greedy or whatever. Whatever negative connotation we have about that person. All of a sudden, the tone of our conversation changes, the mood changes.
Yeah.
But it's our internal world that now affects our conversation because of our of what we've perceived or what we've named that person as in our lives. And then with purposes of manifestation, which is, you know, what we'd be trying to do when we're trying to interrogate the power of the mind that we talked about in last week's episode.
Yeah, long-term thinking, short-term thinking.
So it's like, oh, you say I can change my mind, and if I change my mind, my family, which you know, we've never had anybody in our family graduate school. You know, it's poverty. Nobody has ever touched 100,000 pula. Yeah. You know, they all kind of do specific types of jobs, and every time there's a family function, there's a lot of need. And, you know, we can't do what other families do. Yeah. And you're telling me that if I change my internal world, that one day all of this will be different? Yeah. Really? You know? Yeah. And then you start, you know, believing, maybe going to church, reading the scriptures, I can do all things through Christ who strengthens me, da-da-da-da. And a year later, you look around, your mom is still in the same financial position. Yeah. Your father is still in the same financial position. There hasn't been any progress in your family from A to B. Yeah. So then the question is, which reality is more dominant? And why should I continue on the journey of changing my mind? Yeah. If after devoting an entire year to this mindset, my family's still in the same place. Yeah. Then I think we go now into what you were saying about subjectivity versus objectivity, and, you know, when we apply it, it would seem to me then that like the individual has a choice then. Yeah. In those scenarios. Yeah. Of which reality would be dominant. Yeah.
I think for me it's a balance. I would say that if you're trying to create success, then the dominant reality should be the internal one.
By choice?
By choice and by default. Okay. Because I feel like faith propels humanity into a space of peace, joy, and expectation of the good. And I think when you allow the internal reality to be dominant, you're operating from faith. Focus on what you see and feel in yourself and have a trust that it will eventually materialize. And I think that's the concept of belief. So the internal world would be dominant in that regard. And then there are times where the external world deserves dominance, when somebody abuses you and it's evident, you can't sit and say, my internal world is that I see good of this person.
Yeah.
And one day they're going to turn to be great. It's possible that could happen. But let's interact with them when they're great. But when the external tells us that this is an abuser, let's act on that. And I feel like the external world gives evidence of certain decisiveness and ways that you should act in that moment that require that, but still keep in the frequency of knowing what the purpose of the internal world is. And I think the internal world's purpose is to ground, to center, to keep detached, and to keep one's essence aligned with the universal law, the universal God. And that's the purpose of the internal world. And the purpose of the external world is to protect. So when you see a lion coming, you hear it roar. Ah! You see it running towards you.
It's a great roar.
You see it charging towards you.
Yes.
And I think the use of the external world is to use your five senses to see, to smell, to hear, to taste, to touch, and say, is my physical body in safety or danger? I think that's the purpose of the external world.
Yeah.
Is this person behaving in a way that is appropriate for my safety?
Yeah.
And if they're not, cut.
Yes.
And then the internal world's purpose is to say, you are a spirit having a human experience. Center yourself in the spirit. What are the ways of the spirit? Embody and always keep your intuitive mind aligned with the ways of the spirit. Yeah. So I think that that's the function that they serve for the survival of your being. The survival of a spiritual being is dependent on your internal reality. The survival of your physical being is dependent on your external reality. So you can't be like, oh, I'm abundant, but I haven't eaten in 3 days, but I'm abundant. It's like, yeah, you're abundant. You haven't eaten in 3 days. Go find food and eat. But keep that frequency in your spirit that you're abundant.
Yeah.
But the hunger is telling your external body that, we need food, we need water, we need to survive.
It's an interesting one to wrap your mind around, because then it means that we then assume a multifaceted posture of existence. It's very, so you have to kind of know when to switch one on and off.
Yeah.
Which one is more dominant, which one is to apply.
Yeah.
And to basically have like a, while I wait for things to manifest, this is where we are.
Yeah.
In the physical realm.
Yeah. But it can be very hard.
No, it's hard, but I think
very hard.
Then maybe I think it then addresses like extremist postures.
Yeah.
For example, when somebody then, decides, I'm going to become a person of faith now.
Yeah.
And they'll spend, Sunday after Sunday in church, and they'll devote their entire life to serving in the church. And obviously, I think the goal being to build their internal reality to the abundance that, is promised in the book.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, but what are the actual physical investments you've made towards the wealth that you desire?
Yeah. But it's complex.
So that's what I'm saying, it's quite complex. Because it's to
complex.
say, I see this reality right now,
Yeah.
notwithstanding the reality which I cannot deny, like I am hungry.
Yeah.
That shouldn't prevent me from having faith that this reality can change.
Yeah.
So in other words, you can't be discouraged by what you see physically.
Yeah. When I'm thinking about this conversation, I'm drawing back to my life.
Yeah.
When I was 6, 7, my mom got married to a man. And they were married for 8 years.
Yeah.
And that man was abusive. He beat us up. He subjected us to eating food that was rotten.
Yeah.
And he had a son who also subjected me to some form of sexual abuse. And that was like literally a long part of my life. It was from when I was 7 years old to when I was 17.
Yeah.
So like a good 10 of my life. And I remember the only reason why I would believe that the internal world is dominant is because in my essence, when I was evolving through my life, I did not have a doubt in my being that I was destined for greatness. I kept on saying, I'm destined for greatness, so I have to be top of the school, so I'll become number one in the school.
Yeah.
I'm destined for greatness, I have to be the best in sports. But there was a time where I was 16, and I think that was my breaking point. And I was like, yo, this has been 8-9 years
Of just
constant pain, constant abuse, constant one thing after the other. It's never ending. And I just started getting confused. I was like, I've been holding on to this idea of greatness in me, but I don't have the will to spur on anymore, because 1 year passed, 2 year passed, 3 year passed, 4 year passed, 5 year passed, 6 year passed. When is the greatness coming? When is the greatness actualizing?
And I can attest to the posture of assuming the state, because you only told me about your childhood.
Yeah.
Later
When we're
on,
adults,
when now the external world had manifested in a way that you had understood life ought to be.
Exactly.
And so we're just having, I remember she was doing my makeup and she's telling me everything that she just shared right now.
Yeah.
And you can imagine the shock. I was stunned because we met in high school.
Yeah.
And
everything was unfolding when we were friends,
when we were friends,
studying,
and all of this is happening, and
making a pact that we're gonna study law
and do what we're doing today.
Yeah.
And I never in a million years would have guessed that when we parted ways and she went home, that she was going home to that kind of reality.
Yeah.
Because she was the most bubbliest individual, a person of excellence, and part of the reason why we studied together was I was like, there's no way I'm gonna make it through by myself. I need somebody to help me. And she was the epitome of discipline. I remember she'd wake me up because we'd do sleepovers. And she'd wake me up at like 2 a.m. and say, we need to study. I'm like, haven't we done enough studying for the day? Like, what is going on here?
Mm-hmm. It's wild. Because for me, even when I look at the whole concept of mindset change, I'm like, it's great. I really believe in it. I am the walking evidence of it.
The epitome.
The epitome of mindset.
The embodiment.
Exactly. And that's why I believe in it so much. I'm like, yo, if I was to tell you the details, because I'm even just touching surface level, but if I'm to tell you the details of the miles I've walked, it's insane. And how my life then catapulted to what it is. It's absolutely dreamy for me.
Yeah.
And it made me realize that the internal world has dominance. But notwithstanding having that evidence, I'm still on a path.
Yeah.
And I'm living my life now, and I have dreams that I have.
Yeah.
And I'm nowhere near them. And I see myself walking the same journey I walked as a kid. But in a different capacity. As a kid, it was just more like, how long is it going to take for me to come out of this? Now as an adult, it's like, I have a purpose to fulfill. I have dreams that are so grand. I need to be a multi-billionaire.
Yeah.
Why is that not happening now? And it's been literally 8-9 years as an entrepreneur. And it's hectic. It's hectic. So even when you hear concepts like mindset change, and I think for the president, it's like, I support him fully. And I believe in it so much, because I've told you about the essay I wrote to the World Bank about mindset adjustment. Before he even came up with the whole mindset change, I wrote an essay to the World Bank, and I was like, if you really want to alleviate poverty in Africa, then you have to start with African people's minds, and you have to eliminate the concept of poverty and stop telling and implanting in African people's minds that they are poor, because the more you plant in their minds, in their internal world, that the world that they reside in is full of poverty and that they are impoverished, then you are perpetuating and creating more of a reality that they may even didn't have exposure to. But then it's just like, what are the frameworks that people should work with? Because I give an example of my life where I stayed 8-9 years in abuse, and then one day when I was 17, everything changed like magic. And it's just like, are we saying to the person watching Motswana ko gae, or the African person, stay 9 years in pain because there's hope on the other end?
It starts always with an assessment, because I believe in that. To say, okay, let's do an audit. Where are we now? Individually, as a nation in Botswana, and as Africa.
And as an individual person as well.
Absolutely. Where are we now? And where are we? Is it a direct reflection of our internal world?
Yeah.
Or is it assuming and allowing the external world to define
yeah.
the internal?
Mm.
And is it allowing others to tell us who we are?
Mm.
You know, so
Yeah.
I think for me then it raises the question of the autonomy one exercises over their internal world.
Yeah.
Because it appears to me that maybe Africans are the victims of allowing others to decide
yeah.
what the internal world ought to be. So
Yeah.
if somebody says you're poor when you believe yourself to be abundant.
Yeah.
It brings about that idea of exploring the degree to which you also protect your internal world against interference.
Yeah.
Notwithstanding what may be your physical reality and notwithstanding what other people may be telling you. And then finally, taking the power back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Literally.
Yeah.
That's what it is.
Mm-hmm.
Is now we take the power back because we appreciate that. Hold on a second.
Yeah.
What I see of Africa, what I see of Botswana, and what I see of myself is a function of somebody else's paradigm.
Yeah.
And if I change my internal paradigm and I insist in my internal paradigm
Yeah.
that I am rich,
Yeah.
then over time it'll begin to reflect.
Yeah. So then what dominates? Internal reality or external reality? What governs your success? Internal reality or external reality? And as the Sapiosexual Platter, we are saying investigate, assess diligently, and make sure that what is in the internal world is what needs to be there. And what you see of the external world is how you need to assess it and navigate it and be accepting of it. But always knowing that reality, as you heard from last week's episode from His Excellency Dr. Mokgweetsi Eric Kabetse Masisi, it all starts with your mindset. And your mindset is in your internal world. So let us meditate, let us reflect, so that we make sure that we have that in ourselves that will create prosperity, peace, love, and abundance for ourselves and all. We are the Sapiosexual Platter. Thank you very much for tuning in.